As you can probably tell, there are many ways in which communities and schools can work together. There are volunteer projects and there are partnerships. And this is my old-fashioned PowerPoint. When my computer crashed, I made my husband print out the program. There are three ways to think about community and schools interacting. One is volunteerism, and I think we're all familiar with the term volunteerism. There's community service, in which people are meeting a need in the community that might otherwise go unnoticed or untended. And a third way of thinking of it is service learning, and I am not as sure how that translates or if that is a familiar concept in Polish schools. So I think that we are probably all understanding what volunteerism and the principles in English or in Polish are pretty much, I'm sure, agreed upon, that we do these things in communities, we do these things in churches, we do them in our own street, our neighborhood, as volunteers. And I've already mentioned community service, and many times when students are involved in the community, what they are doing is community service, where they are meeting a larger need, and they are doing that as a group. Service learning in the United States is a little bit more specifically defined as ways in which the curriculum is actually tied to the need in the community, and students have some skills they have learned in the classroom which they can now use in the community and in the service of the community. I think very much like the interviewing skills and then writing of a guidebook. There are also certain factors in service learning which are usually included if the service learning project is to be considered more than just community service or volunteerism, and they are other ways in which the curriculum can be embedded. So for instance, a service learning project is generally student-driven work, and there is research going on the need or the issue in the community, and it comes from the curriculum directly, or it may come as a topic of study in the classroom. Before I go further, let me give you just one or two small stories of service learning projects that are very different. In a particular class in the United States, the teacher and the students began to discuss McDonald's restaurant. And it was not a discussion about whether the food was healthy or not, but it was a discussion about the little toys that come in the children's meal. Children are happier when they have the meal and they have the toy, right? And so the children and the teacher began to discuss whether the toys were really necessary or even wanted by the child. And the children admitted that sometimes they only want the toy because the toy is there, and they really didn't know what happened to the toy after it came home. It was more about manipulating their parents than about wanting the toy. And so the children decided to make a survey among themselves and others. What happened to these toys, and were they really necessary? And they found that most of the toys were actually under the seat of the car, or the dog had eaten them, or they were in the washing machine. And so the children made three simple questions. Do you want the toy? Is the toy important to you? What happens to the toy? And they asked a local McDonald's if they could distribute the surveys on the tray where the paper is, where the food is placed, and the children would return surveys. And then when they were confirmed that indeed children, for the most part, could care less about the toy, they created another survey, and through the same McDonald's, they asked this time if the cost of the toy is equivalent to, say, less than a zloty, would the child prefer not to have the toy, but would donate that cost of the toy to a project. And they found that the children were more than willing, who came into McDonald's, to check the box that said, I do not want the toy, I would like the cost of the toy to be set aside for a charity. And then they could check one of maybe 3 local charities that would receive the money from that McDonald's. So they were learning about what needs were in a community. They were learning a little bit about how economy works. And they were also learning that they had alternatives. But here's the surprising point. The children were 5 years old. So here are some of the points about service learning that are generally accepted to be guidelines for how these projects work. And you can see they can work from very small children to high school to college. The first premise is that the teacher does not have to be the expert. The teacher is a co-learner along with the student. When students started to think about the river, I had no idea about anything about the river, and if it was polluted or not, but I agreed as another faculty member to help the biology teacher and audit that through poems about the river, writings about the rivers, communication, calling people to find out what they thought, and actually trying to bring the issue up more and more before environmental groups. And how this also works with evaluation is that whatever the students find, they should be ready to share with an authentic audience, someone in the community who can make change if the students can't make change. They should be working to influence real-world situations. I have found that there is nothing so powerful as a student who is presenting before a city council, not with a board, like a science display board, but with a business card instead. So we have already said students use what they learn in the classroom for the project. There should be authentic assessments. These could be local or real-world issues, global or local, that can be solved or at least advanced by students. We can look at both advantages and disadvantages to student learning. The advantages of service learning are that students become very actively involved in school. We had students who were non-attenders who suddenly started coming to school so they could work on that mural or go to the river. I have a former student who is now an assistant to the mayor of Columbus who said that the project on the river saved him because he didn't care about school before then. Before we would embark on service learning projects, and I should say too that at one point, in addition to teaching, I was with other faculty, I was helping to run 40 projects in one school. But the first thing that they had to do before we started a service learning project is they had to form a team, and it had to be diverse. And at first look, diversity would seem to mean boys, girls, white, black students. But believe me, when you are in a school in which the majority of students are African American, and there are also gay students, and there are white students, and there are rich students and poor students, the diversity can mean different things. And they had to talk among themselves and trade members of the team to present diversity. And sometimes when they presented why they were a diverse team to me, their reasoning was remarkable. One student had grandparents who lived in rural poverty in the American South, very poor area of Mississippi. And that student came with the knowledge of what real rural poverty was like. But another student would say, I get along with everyone. You think I am African American, but my mother is white. All my mother's relatives are very close to us, so I'm very comfortable with diverse ethnic groups. Because diversity makes a stronger problem-solving team. Not everybody should think alike. And then I would encourage them to create a name, but not a name that usually had the word student in it. Because if they had to call someone on the telephone and they said, hello, I am a student from, or the name of my group are Students for Better Action, they might get click. But if they said, we are Citizens for Better Action, the person on the other end of the phone was more likely to think they were an adult. So now you see how business cards came in handy also. What are drawbacks to service learning? They take time. And teachers sometimes feel they have to be the expert. It is a hard role to be a co-learner. And you have to be able to prove that what is being asked of you on standardized tests can also be answered by the kinds of things you are doing in the community. So the idea of having the principal buy-in, the idea of having the community buy-in is extremely important because life is too short to fight too many battles.